When somebody tells me that they don't see race, I say, I mean, that's fine. You know, you can choose not to see the sky, but it exists.
For some parents, the protests are sparking questions from their kids about race and racism and some of the violence they're seeing.
So Shannon, do you find it difficult to discuss race with white people?
I do, because Skip, if you talk all the way real about America and try to have an open and honest dialogue, conversation with white America,
Yep.
then it would go to it would tear down the very foundation, the very fabric in which they said America was built on.
It's difficult to talk about things like race. It's really difficult to talk about things like race when people have decided that if you don't agree with them, they hate you. It's really hard to talk about it when they express that hate.
How many of you are afraid to talk openly about race? Nobody.
I'll say yes.
Mark your mic. What?
I'll say yes, and here's why. Because I'm white, and I'm going to screw it up somehow. And when we try and talk about race, and I have these built-in insensitivities that are seen by the black community, anything that I say is going to come across from my filter, and it's going to be seen possibly badly. So am I afraid about it? I'm afraid of screwing up, but I want to have the conversation. Yeah.
My name is Keith Gilbert. I am currently working on the fringes as a substitute teacher, as a tennis coach, as a writer, as anything else I can kind of get a handle on. And Caucasian, Jewish.
My name is Bill Stanton. I currently work at the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It's an association. I've worked at associations basically since I got out of college. So I guess you would just consider me an association professional. I consider myself white, but I think that's a more complicated conversation because I think there's a lot more going on than just having to be white or African American or black or anything else.
Hi, my name is Alicia Whittington. I am a research scientist, a healthcare consultant, musician, and I identify as black. However, I put a little asterisk there because of my complex family history.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcos Kraft. I am a technical director at Univision Chicago News Network, and I identify as Latino, but I'm adopted. I was adopted by two Caucasian parents. My mother was born in Germany, so I was raised in a German household. Like our other friends, I'll leave it there. We'll get into it later if the conversation goes. So that's all I got for right now.
I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez, and I identify as Mexican and Mexican American. And yeah, that's I guess it could be a bit complicated too. And what I do for a living is how I earn my living right now is I'm an organizer with the Chicago Religious Leadership Network in Latin America, but I'm a writer as well. I write on my own time, and that's one of my passions.
Check it out. It's Kevin Smith. I'm the media director for Area 309, and yet again, we have another really, really good group for this conversation. Again, these are all my friends, so I'm looking forward to having them. And today's topic is having meaningful dialogues between the races. What we saw before the show started was examples of people trying to have those dialogues. And I've heard everyone from Rachel Maddow and Don Lemon to Megyn Kelly say that we need to have meaningful dialogues and we need to have honest conversations. But what does that mean? Where does that take place? How does it take place? So I guess my first question to my esteemed panel, and they are esteemed, as we saw earlier, have you tried to, kind of since all of this has happened with George Floyd and some of the civil unrest, have any of you tried to have kind of racial dialogues or dialogues about racial issues with other races? And how has that gone for you? Anyone can jump in.
My best friend in Wilmington, Ohio, is a black musician named George, and when this happened, because of my conversation with him, for the first time really in my life, I realized how much I just didn't know, and it shocked me. When I tell you he's my best friend in town, I don't have a lot of friends in Ohio anymore. I mean, he's the guy that I befriended. He's taught me more about not what I'm supposed to think about, but like from how he walks across the street as opposed to how I walk across the street. You know, and it's different, at least the way he described it, and that absolutely shocked me. You know, like in this little town that we're living that's kind of racist. But so yes, I've had many conversations, and every single one, my head kind of blows up a little bit, and I'm not like, I never considered myself naive until this. So it's a shock to me. You know?
I was just gonna say, like, as the other white guy in the group,
the other white guy.
You know, it was. I kind of echo what he's saying. It's, you know, I've never considered myself to be, you know, prejudiced or like racist in any way. But then when you sort of, sadly, we sort of on our own end, we're forced to realize like we're kind of not understanding exactly what's going on. We're lacking the knowledge or the understanding of what you know, people of color are actually like going through. And I think that's the biggest problem with people is well, specifically with like white people, is they're not understanding that, like, they don't feel comfortable knowing that they don't know. And it is more actually the liberal side. It's the people that are like, well, I'm definitely not racist. But then they're realizing that, oh, you don't really understand that there's some latent racism in there, some like privilege in there that it's like just sort of flat out admit that is there. And it's like, it's weird when you consider yourself to be someone like progressive or someone that's, you know, understanding, and then all of a sudden you're sort of like a light shown on you, and it's like, oh, I may not, like, I'm missing some stuff. I don't get it. And that's hard for intelligent white people to handle. They just can't, they can't do it. I'm struggling with it myself, you know, knowing that, like, man, a latent racism that I have that I don't even know I have. And that's weird to like come to terms with.
And to sort of build on that, to set myself up as the best ally I can be in this has also caused me, like, I don't know how to take my cues, I think, because this dialogue is not happening in a way that I can access, in a way that's meaningful where I interact, like on Facebook, for instance, where I do a lot of posting, a lot of progressive stuff, a lot of ire, there's a lot of, and I'm always sort of in my mind, I'm thinking, and I have to do it this way, I was like, would my black friends, would my people of color agree with this statement? And then is my allyship sort of pinned to whether there is agreement in how I approach my allyship?
Yeah, and my job, I work on immigration rights, or immigrant rights. There has been a lot of conversation about race, and obviously not entirely from a black perspective, but we have discussed it because there are many black immigrants who are part of this work of immigrant rights, immigrants from Africa, and who face the black struggle as part of their immigration experience, right? But even then, there is the acknowledgement within our conversations that among Asian immigrants and Latino Latina immigrants, there is the acknowledgement that we don't often work enough with our Black brothers and sisters on issues of social justice and listening. My own thought is I've always pushed that idea, that term, is that we want to engage folks, but we need to listen first, right? So there have been more conversations since the uprising. Certainly they were part there, but not as at the forefront as they are now. And I still continue with that. And I think that's part of this, is this engagement and listening with obviously folks of different races and backgrounds right now. But that's what we're doing. And we're looking here in Chicago specifically. I'm part of the Chicago Immigration Working Group. We're looking on how to better connect with. I think, I grew up in Northwest Indiana. I live there now. But even a couple of years ago, I was moved and impressed by the fact that Black Lives Matter group in Northwest Indiana would come to they saw themselves as brothers and sisters in the struggle for immigration rights. So those conversations have been happening. We would connect with folks on protesting deportations from the Gary Airport. So those conversations have been going on, but I think now they're getting deeper, and I think the listening is far more profound.
So, I will say that in my experience, these conversations have shifted. Years ago, when I tried to have the conversation, conversations were always met with some sort of defensiveness, or that there had to be tension. But now things have evolved, and I'm seeing a lot more empathy. In fact, people are reaching out to me, expressing, their empathy about, just everything that's going on, and just doing wellness checks. What's also been fascinating for me is, even though I'm Black, just kind of examining my educational journey and the things that I was taught that is essentially are things that I need to unlearn, like different terms. Even I don't even want to get into all of it, but I will share this quote. I recently listened in on this virtual conference or workshop on racism, and then how to evolve these conversations in the workplace. And one of the quotes from the facilitator, she said, "We don't suffer from a lack of resources, we suffer from a lack of action." And so, yes, it's really important to have the conversations, but it doesn't stop there. And then also, as a public health professional, one of the things that I'm really, I don't know if excited is the right way to frame it, but we're talking about how racism is a public health issue. And so when you think about just, lifespan, where people live, social determinants of health, things that have an impact on your quality of life and your health, and then just how long you live. And you think about it in the context of everything that's going on now, and it's deeply concerning. You look at what's happening with the pandemic, it's deeply concerning. I could pretty much predict, just because it's my training, I have many years of training in health disparities, and it's heartbreaking that these things have just been in place for so many years, hundreds of them, in fact.
Ms. Whittington, to piggyback on what you said, I like that you said that the conversations have evolved. I like that, and which you're completely true. And I've seen it because before, to have these conversations, all of a sudden you would see, as soon as a race conversation started, years ago, it would be, all right, choose your side first and then come to the middle, as opposed to let's start in the middle and then slowly move out if we have to. why I say that is because I've kind of had the reverse of, say, someone who is solely Latin or someone who is solely Black, because I grew up in a Caucasian household. I got to see kind of the reverse side of it while still being, Latino. While I'm darker than my parents. I mean, heck, my mother said, I asked her years ago, I'm like, when did I first ask about skin color? She said, honest to God, you were 4 years old and we were in the produce section of Acme in Hudson, Ohio, and you asked me in front of the apples, why am I a different color than you? So, and my mom and my father, my mother and my father, they both always lived under the idea of keep answers very true. And so we had a half an hour discussion on adoption, skin color, and why I was a different color than them, and why my name was legally Mark, but it can flip-flop to, if I need to be a Marcos, I can be Marcos. Yeah. But if I can be Mark, then I can be a Mark. So I think but now the discussion has kind of shifted a little bit, and now there are Caucasians that are joining the side of, say, Black Lives Matter, that they're like, no. We understand that things are not fair. And so we can be the bridge to those who are arch against any sort of Black Lives Matter or anything like that. Does that make sense? So, and my parents, they said that, they have fielded questions from family and from strangers. Why are you hanging out with this darker kid? Not many, but still. And they said that, they always approached skin color as, well, as far as love is concerned, well, we're a different skin color than you, but yeah, we love you. So, and my daughter is half Scotch-Irish. I mean, my nickname for her is my Celtic princess. She really is my Celtic princess. So yeah, that's awesome. Again, Ms. Whittington, I love that you put the conversations have shifted. I love that, and I totally want to get more into that.
Can I ask a question about that briefly? So for me, the cause of that evolution was seeing that video. When I saw that video, it kind of shocked me, like, out of everything that was going on with the stuff of George Floyd. When I saw that, and I'm wondering, do you think it was like a cultural zeitgeistic epiphany? Like we all sort of saw it at the same time and just up the level?
I think a few things, actually. So this year has been kind of a mess, but at the same time, this year has been unique for all of us in that this is probably the first time that we've collectively, as a planet, had to press pause on, our daily lives. And so many people are out of work now. And then there was just sort of this buildup of events from Ahmaud Arbery, and then just seeing how horrible that was. Breonna Taylor, and just adding on. And then the pressure was building. It's like if you're making, Kevin will know this reference, when you use your pressure cooker to make that pot roast or whatever it is.
My Instant Pot game is impregnable, like Mike Tyson. I'm just letting you know.
So is mine. I'm getting much better. Yeah, and then looking at what's happened with the pandemic, and since this is a novel virus, there's so many unknowns, even in the medical and public health communities. And so when it emerged that communities of color were disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus, COVID-19, for a multitude of reasons that are even beyond having pre-existing conditions. Like, I think the statistic is that one or fewer than 1 in 5 African Americans have the privilege of being able to work from home. So I think that, just getting back to the topic at hand, it was the buildup of things, and it was just, to the point where we couldn't take it anymore. And then think about how inhumane it is for a man to be begging for his life, something as simple as breathing. And they denied him that. It was like he didn't matter. And for it to be just, on the world stage like that, and my friends abroad were telling me about the different protests that were going on in their respective countries, and you could just sense that something was happening.
Alicia, I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead, man.
No, I just had a question, because this is something I've always been curious about, and I don't use Caucasian anymore, because as far as I understand it, the term comes from the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. Mm-hmm. Sort of was just developed by some random doctor saying like that's the definition of white, is someone that's from the Caucasus region of Russia. And so that became like Caucasian, and that's why I say white instead of Caucasian. I don't know that necessarily white is the right answer, but it seems better than Caucasian because that doesn't seem accurate to what it actually is.
This is a map of the continents of the Earth showing how much ultraviolet light lands in each latitude. It turns out the closer you are to the equator, the more intense the ultraviolet. We use reds and purples. But then as you move away from the equator, we change the colors to orange, yellow, greens, and grays. Now here's the same map of the same continent with just one color. And it turns out that everybody on Earth is descended from people that live here in Africa. And then as groups of us moved around the world, the color of our skin had to change. And here's why. Our skin is where we make vitamin D. If you don't get enough ultraviolet, you don't get enough vitamin D. But if you get too much ultraviolet, then you break down your folates. You have to have it in perfect balance. And because the ultraviolet varies, the color of our skin varies. And that's it, everybody. That's why we have different colored skin. But we're all one species. But we're not treating each other fairly. Not everybody's getting an even shake. So it's time to change things.
And that's another thing that is evolving. So in my introduction, I said that I'm Black. Simply because that's been my experience. I am sometimes forced to check the African American box because that's the only thing that's there. But even the census has evolved. Finally, they took out some archaic language, and that's one of the things that I think will continue to evolve because we don't have all of the answers. And even one of the more recent terms that I've learned about is Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so there's a lot of great literature in the sociology world. I'm not a sociologist, but I wish I'd taken more sociology classes because things like critical race theory and intersectionality and, how people identify themselves, it's fascinating because from a health perspective, you see how groups that can, have so many differences within, they get classified as the same. And then when you even think about some of the recommendations for healthcare screenings, and they're based on when other races or typically white individuals tend to have those particular health issues.
Yeah, those medical issues.
Yes, I'm trying to say it in like the most.
No, I gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And then I think a huge part of it is self-identification.
Well,
and we'll all, go through our little evolution, So.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that it's because one thing I've actually been asking, my Black friends about is like, there's people that are Black that are not African, and how do they like identify themselves? Like they're not African American, but if they live in the US and they're Black, then what are they? You know what I mean? It's like,
and I don't mean to cut you off, Bill, but just to add it to that, conversely, there are African people who don't consider themselves black.
Charlize Theron.
Right. Well, technically, right. That is correct.
Teresa Hines Carey, you know. So
But like,
it's more complicated.
But if you take like my background, my entire family's from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Alicia,
down the street.
Her family's from what? Canton. Your people are from
Canton,
Canton, right?
Mississippi, and
My
also
family's from Jackson.
Right. We actually talked about this.
Yeah, my family's from Jackson.
And my mom was from the Delta, so like Tutwiler, grandparents were from Clarksdale, so deep Mississippi roots. And the complicated family history that I was mentioning earlier, I descend from a colonel in the Confederate Army, and he enslaved 16 individuals, and one of them happened to be my great-great-grandmother. And it's always bothered me that we have a picture of him and his legal wife, but we don't have a picture of my great-great-grandma, Angeline, because we say her name. And yeah, it gets a little bit more complicated from there.
Well, it's kind of crazy because, you know, what Marcus was saying with being like adopted, like, but having like completely German parents, and then you look at me and I'm about as white as you could get, but I actually have sub-Saharan African DNA in me because I'm Sicilian as well. And the more multiple times. And so like my DNA profile is actually all over the map. Like, you know, my ancestors were apparently running around the world doing things because it's a hot mess what my DNA is. My wife, she's just like 98% Northern European. Like, exciting. I'm all over the map. I got like Greek, you know, Balkan, Sub-Saharan African, like I'm all over the map. It's just weird.
That makes you the wonderful, unique individual that you are.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, look, guys, I appreciate everyone giving kind of their introduction. Wanted to ask this question. You know, we've talked about Black Lives Matter, and we talked about, I'm going to talk about this, I'm bringing this in. I don't want to get partisan politically, but my question, I know that our current executive, I think he's done a lot to kind of divide people and to kind of pit people against each other. That's my personal.
Has he?
But I guess my question is, do you feel that our current administration and the current political climate has increased kind of almost the tribalism in terms of the division between the different races?
Well, I think there's two things going on. To piggyback on the last part of the conversation, part of the big convulsions that are happening on the right is what was said before, is that they're not, the lexicon, they've not been able to leap or move with the new lexicon. It's frozen in time for them. And I think that rather than now that Ed, what you're saying is the executive right now has done everything he can do to keep it frozen. So by him sort of setting the example that he's setting, he's not allowing, like maybe every executive that ever came before him, allowing the culture to move on, because he keeps saying things that are and tribalizing, etc. So I think it's all kind of mushed in together. Like, I genuinely think there are a lot of people, if given the opportunity to embrace new lexicon, they would do it. I get that feeling, but they're not. Just like the mask thing, when you think about it, I mean, you know, around here, as soon as Trump put on a mask use went up like 30-40%. My time, it's the same thing with the language and lexicon.
Certainly. I mean, certainly he is, I think one of the reasons why his base and other folks love him is Trump is because he says what he feels and what he thinks. He doesn't care about any criticism, and he confirms what a lot of people feel. I mean, the way he kicked off his campaign last time was like calling Mexicans, rapists, and drug dealers, right? And bad hombres. So yeah, I think that's undeniable. And the way he would say these are my African Americans, or he would point out at people or say that people should be beat up, like at one of his rallies, that he would pay their legal fees, and also the thing that happened in Charlestown with the set and the 5 people he said that were there. I mean, I think that's undeniable. He's just the latest manifestation of something that's deeply set in U.S. history and U.S. politics, U.S. culture. And the fact that people felt racism had somehow just diminished, or it has, and not that things are exactly the same as they were 50 years ago, but there are problems that remain and that have to be dealt with. Honestly, I think as painful as that is, that they have to be dealt with honestly. I think my comparison, my thought, is that the United States has an addiction, where there's this, it's almost like a recovery program, a 12-step program. How do you feel when you have an addiction or a very huge gaping hole in your spiritual, mental life? And you address it honestly, right? And I think the United States has never done that to the level that it needs. And because that hasn't happened, we have to continue to have, not that we're going to live in a perfect society, but we're going to continue to have issues, and I think very painfully so.
It's one of those things, I think, with our current president, I actually think he's not as racist as people think he is. I think he's just playing a game. I don't think he actually has the hurt feelings that people portray to him. And I'm not a fan of his at all. Never would vote for him. Think he's a bag. But besides that, what I'm saying is that I think he's just playing a game, and that's what makes it more scary for me than anything else. Is he's just playing a game as president. He's playing a game. He's doing whatever. What he did was he got the vote of all the backwoods randos, and someone realized and said, hey, do you realize how many of these people are out there that you can sort of appease if you say the right things and you say this racial crap? That's why he got elected, because they delved into the deluge of just shitty people out there, and it actually is scary, because then it forced the rest of the people in the world to be like, oh crap, there's that many of those crappy people out there that he was able to win the presidency because of it. Sorry, that was political.
I might be able to add a little bit to that. To go on a little bit with that thought, it's kind of interesting that out of all these conversations that I've taken a look at, being on Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media platform you want to have a discussion on, the interesting thing is this. The conclusion kind of that I've come to is that, well, first off, this is not news to pretty much to almost any colored person in this country. This country has a serious race problem, a serious one. But the even bigger problem with that is the conclusion that I've come to is that a lot of these racists in this country don't view themselves as racist. They don't view themselves as the problem. And that in and of itself, it's like, where do you go? My God, that's like having a conversation with a basketball. Jesus. And
that is why a lot of the experts are saying that to frame the conversation, you talk about it within the context of a system, because, if you start off by saying you're racist, or you call someone for them, or for many people, that's an insult, and the conversation leads to nowhere. And then there's a difference between not being racist and then being anti-racist. And oh gosh, there's so many great conversations that are taking place around this. But even those who are not racist, they benefit from racism.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we need to encourage them somehow to become anti-racist. But thankfully, I've met a lot of great people on this journey that have constantly reminded me, like, Alicia, you've been, dealing with a lot of these issues for a long time. It is not up to you to do this work. Let me do this work. Let me be that ally, which I appreciate because it can derail my day.
I consider this exercise an injection of the live virus of racism. If you've been through this exercise, the next time you see racist behaviors, sexist behaviors, homophobic behaviors, ethnocentric behaviors, ageist behaviors, maybe you will say to yourself, wait a minute, I had that for one morning. I'm never going to allow that to happen in my presence again without responding to it negatively. I do this in a mean, nasty way because racism, sexism, ageism, homophobia, ethnocentrism are mean and nasty. Today, I am here because I have been asked to do an exercise in discrimination based on eye color. Now, the purpose of this exercise is to give these nice, blue-eyed white kids the opportunity to spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the receiving end of the treatment which we mete out to people of color on a daily basis in this country. They're in a blue-eyed holding room right now. They are not eating, they are not drinking. There are 3 chairs in there for 12 people. We're going to bring these people in here. You're going to treat them as though they're inferior, because they are inferior. Everybody understand that? They're not going to learn because they can't learn, and because we're going to set it up so they can't learn. And if they succeed, who has failed? We have. Do you people want to fail? No. If they get power, who loses power? We do. Do you want to lose power? No. For 400 years in this country, we've been basing our judgment of people on the color of their skin. Eye color and skin color are caused by the same chemical, melanin. If you have a lot of melanin in your hair, your skin, and your eyes, you have very dark hair, very dark eyes, and very dark skin. If you have only a little melanin in your skin, your hair, and your eyes, you have light skin, light hair, and light eyes. These people all have too little melanin in their eyes. So obviously, they aren't as smart as we are. We're going to accuse them of not being as smart as we are. We're going to accuse them of not being as clean as we are. We're going to lower our expectations for them. We're going to force them to live down to our expectations of them. And when they do, we're going to blame their inability to perform on the color of their eyes. Now, in order to get them into their adult ego state, we're going to try to teach them the listening skills. Now, what do we call men that we want to keep in their childlike state? Boy. We're going to call these males boy. You're not going to use their given name. You're going to call them boy. Or you're going to call them bluey. Or you're going to call them fool.
Something that I thought was really, really interesting when watching that video was that people, you saw sort of like it click with like certain groups, like, oh, like they can't handle this for 2.5 hours. Imagine this is your life, or like this is your experience. This is your walking down the street. This is everything. And seeing one of the people just sort of have to walk out because they couldn't deal with it for 2.5 hours is like shows like how much is not understood.
On the day these white kids are in this exercise, they see themselves as other people see them for the first time in their lives. Do you know the physical aspects of the listening skills?
Afraid not.
You're afraid not? What about you?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. What about you?
A bit.
A bit?
Yes.
A bit?
Yes.
Well, tell me what the bit is that you know.
The bit that I know is that you stand up straight, you look at the person who's speaking, and you pay attention to what they're saying.
What if you're sitting down?
I am sitting down.
Then you can't listen, right?
No, you can listen by sitting down.
Oh, you just said you stand up straight?
I said you sit up straight.
Did she say you sit up straight, or did she say you stand up straight? Is this a universal problem with blue-eyed people? You have a paper and pencil with you?
No.
Do you?
Over in my bag, maybe.
Over in your bag?
Yes.
Why is it in your bag?
Because that's where I keep it.
That's where you keep it.
When I'm
Why
not
did you put
using
your paper and pencil over there?
Because I did not know when I was going to be needing it.
You came to a learning experience, right?
Yes.
Did you ever go to a learning experience before?
Yes.
Did you ever take notes?
Yes.
What did you use?
I used a paper and pencil.
Paper and pencil. And did you keep it with you so that you could take notes?
Yes.
Yes. Why didn't you do that this time?
Because I was not planning on taking notes.
You weren't planning on taking notes? You
No.
think you can remember everything that's going to be done in here and said in here?
Not word for word.
Not word for word, so what should you have done?
I
Probably, she's going to say, I probably should have done it right. What should you have done?
I should have brought my paper and pencil over here and kept it with me
That's
the entire
right.
time.
That's right. You're acting angry.
I am angry.
What are you angry about?
I'm angry that you're yelling at me.
Do you hear me yelling? This is yelling! Have I done that yet?
Okay, you're using a stern voice and it's making me angry.
Are you defining me?
No, I am not defining
Is she
you.
defining me? Does she say I'm yelling when I'm not? Perception is everything. Do you feel like I'm yelling at you?
Yes.
Yes, why?
Because you're using a stern voice.
A stern... Honey, it isn't my fault you're stupid.
Would you like me to go get my paper and pencil?
I wouldn't like you in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, then that's fine.
Let's get that understood here.
Okay.
This isn't a matter of whether I like you or not. Repeat after me. One hen.
One hand.
One hen, two... Not hand. Hen. 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 Lays eggs. One hen.
One hen.
One hen, two ducks.
One hen, two ducks.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese, four limerick oysters.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese, four Hemerick oysters.
Hemerick oysters?
I'm sorry.
Limerick oysters.
Limerick oysters.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese, four limerick oysters, five corpulent porpoises. You can remember everything, honey.
No,
This
I
isn't
can't.
hard for you. Go for it.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese, four Limerick oysters, five, I forget the other one. Sorry.
So maybe you would have been better off if you could have taken notes for this, right?
I do not find the need to take notes for that.
I'm going to ask you to remember this for the rest of this time. Next one. 6 pairs of Darnell Varsies tweezers. Start with 1.
One hen, two ducks, three squawking geese, four Limerick oysters, five, I do not know, six, I forget.
You're going to have to know this. I'm going to keep testing you on this. What would be a good idea for you to have?
Paper and pencil.
Paper and pencil. Therein lies the beginning of wisdom. Are you angry?
No.
Oh, good for you. You angry?
Trying not.
Trying not to be. Now, does that take a lot of energy?
Yes.
Yes. Are you holding it in?
Yes.
Yes. And are you trying really, really hard not to react to me?
Yes.
Yes. And are you trying really hard not to look at me?
At the moment, yes.
Yes. Why?
Because I don't want to make myself more upset.
You don't want to make yourself more upset by looking at me.
Yes.
Right. Does that take a lot of time, a lot of energy?
Yes.
Yes. Is that hard for you?
Yes.
Could you develop an ulcer over this?
No.
If you had to do it every day, what would happen to your blood pressure?
It would rise.
Yeah. If somebody stood over you and you knew it was going to happen every day? Or you expected it to happen every day? Or it happened when you didn't expect it to? Or it happened to your kids every day? After it happened to your mother every day? Now, getting right along. Your hand is still up. You still didn't learn anything, did you? Didn't I just say when your hand is up, you are thinking of what you're going to say instead of what's being said? Didn't I just say that?
Yes, you did.
And did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
And did you decide that you were just going to do it your way?
I was.
Wait a minute, you're on a roll
yes,
there for
I
a minute.
did.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I did.
Now, since you choose to not listen to others, what do you suppose we're going to do where you're concerned?
No, listen to me.
Thank you very much.
May I finish what I was saying,
No, because you're still thinking of what you're going to say instead of what I'm saying. Now, getting right along.
I heard what you were saying.
You're doing
I
it again.
understand what you were
You're
saying.
doing it again.
I don't care.
You're doing it
because
again.
It's wrong.
You're
and you
doing it again.
Persecuted her for standing
You're
out.
doing it again.
Persecuted him for standing out. The only change that ever happens is when people stand out, and I have to stand back too.
Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. Are you in any physical danger here? Are you in any physical danger here? Is that girl in any physical danger here? Emmett Till was hanged by his neck after he was beaten almost to death, simply because he made a statement to a white woman. no. You don't come back in here until you've apologized to every person in this room, because you just exercised a freedom that none of these people of color have. When these people of color get tired of racism, they can't just walk out, because there's no place in this country where they aren't going to be exposed to racism. They can't even stay in their own homes and not be exposed to racism if they turn on the television. But you, as a white female, when you get tired of being judged and treated unfairly on the basis of your eye color, you can walk out that door, and you know it won't happen out there. You exercised a freedom they don't have. If you're going to be in here, you're going to apologize to every black person in this room. And do it now.
I'm
and
sorry.
the Latinos, every person of color.
Racism, this country.
Bullshit! No, you're not gonna say, I'm sorry there's racism. You're going to apologize for what you just did.
I will not apologize because it is not a matter of race always.
Out. Now, is she choosing to leave? Yes. She could apologize and stay.
I won't play the wrong game anymore.
It ain't gonna hurt her. It's not gonna hurt her to apologize.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
What's going on in this room alone? Once she leaves it, that's it. It's over with.
Okay. That ain't gonna hurt her. Is it gonna hurt her?
She, according to her action, it's killing her.
Yes. It's killing her.
Like it shows, for me, it didn't show like, it shows how much like racism is actually out there. It showed more like what, people of color have to go through on a daily basis. It's just sort of ingrained in them. They're just like, I can handle it, like I have to. Whereas like people like myself, it's like we don't really have to like handle that. And so when something gets me mad, it's like something like has to like spark it. It's something that like there has to be an event that causes me to be mad. Whereas with them, with people of color, it's like sort of this ingrained like constant sort of like bug in their ass that like, because they always have to deal with it. It's not something that goes away. It's not like someone yelling at you. It's not an event that has to take place that gets you mad. It's subtle, constant like anger.
Well, and think about like something like a concept like gerrymandering. I mean, if you're not pretty astute politically, that idea of that is just not going to connect, and yet it has profound implications on systemic racism. In fact, it helps keep systemic racism in place. And then when you go look at like prison labor, I mean, oh my God, there's no way to explain that in a Facebook comment, in a soundbite. The implications of like the Microsoft paying private prisons money to, it's like, how do you even get this into, and no offense, because I'm really not trying to be political, but you're talking about the average reading level of an American is some dismal 8th grade level. You trying to explain gerrymandering to someone who doesn't have the education to handle the powerful concept there. I mean, and trying to couch. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I don't mean to cut you off, Keith, but and I think the thing that's also important is concepts like gerrymandering and redlining, and I think, and I don't
environmental racism.
Right. I mean, I think there are less, and I don't mean to be flip about this, but less sexy racism terms like gerrymandering, redlining, but they have far-reaching implications. Dr. Whittington is a public health person. Everything that we've talked about has deep public health ramifications.
Exactly.
If you extend it out. Where you live can determine, right, gentrification. Where you live determines your public health.
And here's another thing too, Kevin.
Go ahead,
not
Dr.
to cut you off, but in the same vein, there have been studies like looking at social determinants of health, which is like where you're born, the situation into which you're born, things like zip code, things that like, determine allocation of resources like education, just all the things. There's been research that has demonstrated that people that move away from those communities have the same health outcomes as those who stay. So when you think about the impact, like early on in life and how it affects you later on, it is frightening.